says Joseph is a great example of decisiveness amidst uncertainty, or he's a great example of faith and patience and doing his best and being diligent amidst uh, uh, a lot of bad situations, but becoming extremely successful because of how he dealt with famine, how he dealt with hardship, how he dealt with that adversity. He didn't freeze up. He did his best with the cards that were dealt him, so to speak. In every situation, he went through a lot of lousy situations. In every situation, he rose to the top. And so I want to look at his life because I think he's a good example of this principle of a lot of lessons we can learn from him. So I'm just going to give kind of overviews of chapters. Beginning in Genesis chapter 37. We aren't going to read it, but basically it tells the first one, it first starts talking about Joseph. It talks about his dreams, right? He has these dreams of greatness that God had. He had a dream. And that's an important concept, and that kind of ties in with some of the earlier lessons that we talked about, the importance of having a vision or having a dream, of knowing where you're headed. And that's important because you want to have, in the midst of uncertainty, you need to still have a clear vision of, okay, why am I here? What am I doing? What's my goal? Because if you have that, that's going to help you make the decisions you need to make. And Joseph was a dreamer, and he had a good dream. And it was a dream that helped drive his life and who he became. And he was favored. It tells us in Genesis 37 that Jacob loved Joseph more than his siblings. Now that's kind of a lousy parenting, but Joseph's life was characterized by favor because everybody loved Joseph. And what you see is at the same time, and that's not true. Everybody doesn't love Joseph, but but he was favored in every situation. And here's the other thing: a lot of times he was envied in most of these situations. So we see this duality in Joseph's situation is while he's favored from his dad, he's envied by his brothers. And you see that this principle is the more successful you become, the more adversity you face, because envy and favor go together. So if you're going to start doing big things from God, you're going to actually get bigger enemies. You're going to come under attack just for doing the right thing. It goes together. The more successful you become, the more adversity you'll face. So in other words, not only are you going to have to be decisive amidst uncertainty, but you're going to have to get better and better at the decisions you make in the midst of uncertainty, because you're going to have even more opposition. And so you're going to have to even get better at adapting. And we see with Joseph that also there's kind of that principle that success is tied to interpreting dreams from God. To know what God's plan is for you, to interpret it and keep the main thing, and keep your eyes on the prize that he has. And when you have a dream from God, it inspires opposition. Okay? When you have something that's from God, when you have a vision from God, there are going to be people that oppose you. And it's going to inspire people to oppose you. And that's the thing too. If you have a delusion, if you say, like lots of people that brag about great things that they plan on doing, and you look at them like, looking at your life, you're never going to do it. You're just a big talker. If you're a big talker, that's not going to inspire a bunch of opposition because nobody believes in you as a threat. Okay? So your enemy won't rise up against you because they don't take you on as a threat. So if you have a dream from God that you're following, it's going to inspire opposition because you're a threat. Now, it's not like if you're deluded, it's like it's not opposition. There'll be necessarily that people might be coming along the way to trying to, that dream's crazy. That's not a time to be arrogant and double down. There's still a humility that goes with it. But you have to understand that you're going to have Those are, and still in that situation, there's people trying to constructively help you. But when you have a real dream from God, that's not the motivation. The opposition is to oppose you and stop you. And so if you have enemies, that's an indication that maybe you're doing the right thing. So, and here's the cool thing of when you have opposition, you have an enemy. If it's a dream from God, interference with the dream from God just helps bring it to pass. And that's what we see in Joseph's life, is all kinds of things came against him to stop the dream, but all those things just work together to fulfill the dream because it's from God. And you can see in the relationships that Joseph went through, he had a lot of disappointments, and we see that in Joseph, what his own brothers, that he didn't know how much they hated him, that they threw him in a pit. And we see in Genesis 37 that if you have faith in people, it will frustrate you, it will disappoint you, it will hurt you, it will even lead you to a pit. People will do that. But faith in God will bring you through the worst stuff people can do to you and still cause you to succeed through all of it. So have your faith in God. Keep your faith in God. Keep the vision of God before you as you go through things, and it will help you to continue to make the right decisions. Okay? And you can succeed through all of it like Joseph did. So then there's a little bit of an intermission in Genesis 38. It connects to the larger story, but just for the purpose of talking about Joseph, we skip to Genesis chapter 39, and we get to Genesis 39 through 40, and we see a story of prosperity in the midst of continual adversity. So Joseph continues to be outstanding in all that he does. Let's look at it. Genesis 39, let's read verse 1 through 6. It says, "Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian." Okay, what it's saying here is remarkable, because at the end, the last we heard in Genesis 37 of Joseph is he was thrown into a pit and sold into slavery. And here it's saying the Lord was with Joseph. He was a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hand. Verse 4, "So Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. Then he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had he put under his authority. So it was from the time that he had made him overseer of his house and all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field. Thus he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance." Okay, this is remarkable. This is what we see some attributes of Joseph. The Lord was with him. He was a successful man. Everything he put his hand to prospered. He was favored by his masters. He was promoted to overseer. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and the field. He was completely trusted with maximum authority. He was even good looking. Okay? Joseph had a lot going. He was in a terrible circumstance and yet had this incredible report. Listen, your character will cause you to prosper in the worst of circumstances. If you will have good character and good work ethic and be trustworthy and work hard to cause the things that you do to prosper, God will be glorified and you will be promoted. Joseph's whole life was in an uncertain state. He was a slave. He prospered even in his uncertain circumstances because of the decisions that he made to be a person of excellence. And he had favor. And so that favor caused him to be trusted with maximum authority. But in the midst of that, even despite all that thing, even that good thing, it says He was lusted about, lied about, and thrown in prison. Look at Genesis 39, verse 20 through 23. It says, Then Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever they did there, it was his doing. The keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. Joseph is this great guy. His brothers throw him in a pit, sell him as a slave. Joseph's in slavery. He's this great guy. He's promoted to the top. What? Then Potiphar's wife lies about him, accuses him of things he didn't do, and he's thrown into prison. He's in prison. His character doesn't change. He still makes good decisions. He doesn't make a decision, that's it, I give up on God, I'm going to pout and live in sin. He doesn't do that. He stays the same. He still makes good decisions, and then he rises to the top in prison. Now, the guy in prison says, I'm going to put everything under your authority. As a prisoner, I'm giving you like free reign to run this thing under me. So, and what does he do while he's in prison? In Genesis chapter 40, Joseph interprets dreams, and as a result, he helps a guy who finds deliverance. And so again, he interprets dreams. He's a dreamer. He has dreams from God. So he can interpret dreams. He uses this gifting to help other people. And what happens? Genesis 40, verse 23. He has a dream about a butler getting delivered, and just says, remember me when you get out. And it says in verse 23, yet the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Okay, so he's just been this amazing guy, and he's forgotten about and remains in prison for 2 years. Pretty rotten deal. He's going through some terrible stuff. But the guy is consistent and diligent in all that he does. And we finally get to a turning point in Genesis 41. We know finally the butler remembers Joseph. He tells Pharaoh about him because Pharaoh had some dreams. Joseph interprets some dreams. And Joseph is brought before Pharaoh. Go to Genesis 41, verse 38 through 46. We see some attributes again of Joseph. It says, and Pharaoh said to his servants, Can we find such a one as this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God? Then he's talking about Joseph. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, inasmuch as God has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall be ruled according to your word. Only in regard to the throne will I be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring off his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and he clothed him in garments of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. And he had him ride in his second chariot which he had, and they cried out before him, bow the knee. So he set him over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh also said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without your consent no man may lift his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath-Paneah, and he gave him as a wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. So Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt. Okay, so these are some things that we see about Joseph. Joseph had the Spirit of God. First of all, he had the Spirit of God. 2, he could interpret a dream from God. That may seem like, well, that's cool. But what gifting has God given you? What did he do with this ability to interpret a dream from God? That leads to the third thing. So 1, he had the Spirit of God. 2, he could interpret a dream from God. 3, he helped others interpret their dreams from God. He helped others. That's how you use the gifts that God gives you, is help others. Now, every time he helped other people, he still ended up in these rotten circumstances. He never changed, though. He stayed diligent, and he continued to use his gifting to help others even when circumstances turned bad for him. But he does it again. He helped others interpret their dreams from God. 4, he made others rich from a position of poverty. Pharaoh was blessed. Potiphar was blessed. The keeper of the prison were blessed. All while Joseph is in a position of poverty. That didn't cause him to stop using his gift for God. He still used it to help others. 5, he learned prosperity through adversity. A lot of people want to be made rich so they can be comfortable. Joseph became rich through difficulty. And you can be successful through uncertainty and challenges and difficulties and hardship. And that's really the normal route for success, to be honest. Great victors are great victors because they go through great battles. Joseph learned prosperity through adversity. And this is a big one. Everything God gave him, he used for others. Back to Genesis 41, where we see that Joseph was 30 years old when he's before the king. I just also want to say, we said all those, let me say again. 1, he had the Spirit of God. 2, he could interpret a dream from God. 3, he helped others interpret the dreams from God. 4, he made others rich from a position of poverty. 5, he learned prosperity through adversity. 6, everything God gave him, he used for others. 7, he was a billionaire by age 30. Think about that. All of these terrible circumstances, and God makes him a billionaire by age 30. Here's the moral. In the worst and most inconvenient of circumstances, with the most excuses to be bitter and quit, the most excuses to be fearful and freeze up, make everyone around you as blessed as possible. The more selfless your service and giving, the greater the glory of God will shine through your life. That's the story of Joseph. Okay, I read the wrong passage. Let's go back. Genesis 41, verse 46. Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt. Now in the 7 plentiful years the ground brought forth abundantly, so he gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt and laid up the food in the cities. He laid up in every city the food of the fields which surrounded them. Joseph gathered very much grain as the sand of the sea until he stopped counting, for it was immeasurable. And to Joseph was born 2 sons before the years of famine came. From Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bore to him. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God has made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. And the name of the second he called Ephraim, for God had caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. And this is cool. After everything that Joseph went through, he has 2 sons. Manasseh, what does Manasseh mean? God has caused me to forget all my toil and all my father's house. So all the bad stuff that he went through, all the suffering, God had so blessed him that it's like he caused him to forget, and the pain of it to be removed. And the name Ephraim meant God had caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. See the redemption in that. To get us, after all he went through, it like became as if nothing compared to the blessing of doing the right thing. The decisions that he made for God amidst uncertainty overshadowed all the suffering that he went through. Covenant blessings of obedience to God will make you forget your pain. God converts the land of affliction to the land of prosperity. Okay, now we come to Genesis 41, verse 53 through 57. So the 7 years of plenty, which were in the land of Egypt, are over. Then the 7 years of famine had come. Joseph has Pharaoh. Pharaoh says the Egyptians, go to Joseph, do what he says. The famine's everywhere. The famine's severe in the land. And so everybody's coming to Joseph to buy grain because the famine was severe in all lands. Okay, so here's some principles we see from Joseph. You store up in abundance, you disperse in famine. Okay, so in part of the decisions that you make, instead of freezing up, when times are bad, you're acting, you're dispersing, you're doing things. When good times are happening, you prepare. Okay, you do both. You have to, what Joseph did, he converted his mindset from looking at what he needed. He could have said, oh, poor me, I'm in prison. Poor me, I was lied about. Poor me, I'm in a pit. He converted his mindset from looking at what he needed to appreciating what he had that he could give and invest. If you will appreciate what you have from God and give it and invest it, you'll be successful instead of looking at yourself and what you need. And that's a hard mindset to switch, but it's important if you're going to be successful. It'll help you make better decisions, okay? last verse I want to look at, Genesis 42, verse 6. Now Joseph was governor over the land, and it was he who sold to all the people of the land, and Joseph's brothers came and bowed down before him with their faces to the earth. Okay? What is he doing? Joseph, not only did he have the plan to implement, Joseph was the one selling the grain. What does that mean? He was working his own plan. He didn't just delegate it and dump it to somebody else. There is something to say when we take personal ownership of labor. And because Joseph wasn't just retiring because he executed the plan and he was so prosperous that he was going to quit and say, let somebody else manage it. He was on the front lines. He was doing something because of that personal ownership that he displayed. It led to the fulfillment of his dreams. What was his dreams? He dreamed that he saw these, he saw his brothers and symbolically bowing down to him. And here, while he saw like grains, fields of grain bowing to him. And so what happens? They come in, they're buying grain and they're bowing down. He saw fulfillment of his dreams because he took ownership in his labor. He was default aggressive. Okay? This is an object lesson of the stewardship of life itself. It's not where you start. It's not what you're entitled to. It comes down to the choices you make that determine who you become. Okay?